Objective 3, construct a frequency and relative frequency bar graphs. So we want to get a frequency distribution to eventually make a table. Now again, going back to our previous lecture here, a frequency distribution lists each category and frequency of each category. A relative frequency distribution lists each category and the relative frequency of each category. Now, a definition: a bar graph is constructed by labeling each category of data on the horizontal axis and the frequency or relative frequency of the category on the vertical axis. Rectangles or bars of equal width are drawn for each category, and the bars do not touch. The height of the rectangle is equal to the category's frequency or relative frequency. So, for example, a class was asked, out of the following superpowers, which would you prefer to have? Flying, telepathy, telekinesis, or invisibility? So for part A, we want to construct a frequency and relative frequency distribution. So we have a column that represents superpowers, we have a column that is frequency, and then we have a relative frequency. So out of the total students in this class, there were 18. Flying, 5 students, the frequency, preferred to have flying. Telepathy, 3 students. Telekinesis, 8. Invisibility, 2. And then in order to find the relative frequency, we need to take the frequency and divide it by the total. So 5 out of 18 is 0.28, which gives us 28%. For telepathy, 3 over 18 is equal to 0.17, which gives us 17%. For telekinesis, 8 divided by 18 gives us 0.44, which is equal to 44%. And 2 out of 18 is equal to 0.11, which is equal to 11%. Now, before we move any further, okay, let's see what happens when we add these percentages together. So if we take 28% plus 17% plus 44% plus 11%, then we should get a total of 100%. And that's what we should get when we have our relative frequency. Now, when we want to construct a frequency and our relative frequency bar graph, well, let's take a look at this first one here. This first one is our frequency bar graph. And this is going to be our relative frequency bar graph. So now let's take a look below here. So what do we do here? Well, we have superpowers, which is on the horizontal axis. The frequency or relative frequency should always be on the vertical axis. So for the superpowers, we had flying. And if you can see here, we go from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. So that means that this represents the total frequency for flying. For telepathy, we had 3. So again, that was the total frequency for telepathy. For telekinesis, we had 8. So we have a bar graph that totals up to 8. And then for invisibility, we had 2. So therefore, this is our frequency bar graph. Now for our relative frequency, okay, this now, we still have the horizontal axis, which is the categories in the superpowers. And then our vertical axis is going to have the relative frequency. And so if we look at our percentages, we go from 11% to 44%. So 11% is the smallest, where 44% is the largest. So we go in increments of 5 all the way up to 45%. So if we take a look at flying, we had a 20% relative frequency. So we can see here that this represents 28%. for flying. For telepathy, you can see that we have 17%. So we're going to go all the way up to 17% on our bar graph. So there's our 17%. For telekinesis, we had 44%. So therefore, this is our 44%. And then for invisibility, we have 11%. So again, what we've done is we've taken our distribution, frequency distribution and relative frequency distribution. So we were able to use this table and then converting them into bar graphs. Now again, the frequency bar graph has the frequency as the vertical axis, and the relative frequency is going to have the relative frequency in the vertical axis. Okay, so here's an example. It says the frequency bar graph below describes how often 1,026 Facebook users visit the site. So let's first examine what this looks like. We have Facebook visits. Down on the horizontal axis says how often site is visited. So we have daily, weekly, and less often. And then in the vertical part, we have the frequency, which goes from 100 all the way to 700. So if we look at daily and weekly and less often. So which variable is described by the bar graph? Well, the variable is how often is Facebook visited? Is it categorical or numerical? Well, it is categorical. Part B, it says estimate the number of Facebook users in the study who visited the site less than once per week. So this is less often, and if you look up here, we kind of approximated over here. It's in between 100 and 200, so we're going to say it's 150. Let's estimate the number of Facebook users who in the study who did not visit the site daily. Well, we know that there were 150 estimated for less often. And if we look at weekly, we can estimate this at about maybe 226. Not exact, but it's pretty close. Okay, because again, we're estimating. So if we add those two numbers together, 226 plus 150 gives us 376. So that means that these were not part of the daily count. Now in part D it says the study included a total of 1,445 online users, but only some of them used Facebook. Estimate the percentage of online users who used Facebook. Well, if we go back up to the question here at the beginning, it says here that this graph below described 1,026 Facebook viewers who visited the site. And it said that the study included 1,445 online users. So we're going to take 1,026 and divide it by 1,445, which gives us 0.71, and therefore 71% of online users who used Facebook. Now, if we want to estimate the percentage of online users who did not use Facebook, we're going to take this amount and then subtract it from 100%. So 100% minus 71% gives us 29% of online users who did not use Facebook.